Hey, what's up, guys? Today we're going to be doing a deck tech for Trostani, Selesnya's Voice. This is going to be a token deck, or a Populate deck, because her ability says whenever another creature enters the battlefield under your control, you gain life equal to that creature's toughness, and you can pay one, a green, and a white, and tap it to populate. It's a 2/5 for 4 mana. And the fact that it does take double green and double white will come into play. So yeah, you're going to want to put a bunch of tokens down and make a bunch more of them is basically how the deck goes. I will tell you up front, you're probably going to want to buy, well, if you want to build this exact deck, you have to buy the mono green commander deck from the 2015 Commander series, but it's really helpful to have those cards. There's just some excellent stuff in there. It's really good. So we're gonna go over mana base real quick. We've got a Plains, a Crystal Vein, which is from the Commander deck. You can tap it to add one colorless, or tap and sack it to add two colorless. You have no idea how helpful that is. And I'm gonna put Sacrifice lands in a separate pile, because there's a card. I'll go ahead and there's a card that helps a lot. Reliquary Tower. There's not many draw spells in here, but if you find yourself with those combos on the field, then this is a really useful card. You want no maximum hand size, and it can tap for a colorless. Forest. Temple Garden. That is the green-white shock land. You can pay 2 life and have it enter untapped. It'll tap for green or white. Terramorphic Expanse. Just Evolving Wilds. Technically, you can tap and sack for a basic land that will enter tapped and shuffle your library. Temple of Plenty. This is the scry land, so it'll enter tapped. You can scry one, tap for green or white. Evolving Wilds, like I said, same thing as Terramorphic Expanse. This is the promo from Dragons of Tarkir. It's the Tarkir Dragon Fury promo, so it was from the pre-release. And then Blossoming Sands is the green-white gain land. Gain a life, it'll enter tapped. You can tap for green or white. Slippery Karst is the mono green cycle land, so it'll enter tapped. You can, and then it'll tap for green, or you can discard it to draw 2, or to draw 1 if you pay 2. Sorry. Arctic Flats. This is the snow land, but you can just use it like a guild gate. It'll enter tapped, and you can tap for green or white, and that's it. There's a Plains, and a Forest, and another Forest, and yet another Forest. Then here's Haunted Fengraf. Oops, I forgot. I said I was going to do a thing, and I didn't even do it. Terramorphic Expanse and Evolving Wilds Sacrifice. Here's Haunted Fengraf. It'll tap for a color, so you can pay 3 and tap and sack it, and you get a creature at random from your graveyard to your hand. The interesting thing with this deck is there are several creatures, but there are a lot of non-creature spells that will get you creature tokens. So what you can do is the creatures, you really want your creatures, so if one of them dies, you can actually use this to get a creature back, even though you have a ton of creatures on your board, because there might be relatively few creatures in your graveyard, because a lot of times the spells that got you creatures, and then even if those creatures died, you don't have creatures in your graveyard, they were non-creature spells, and then that is a sacrifice land as well. Here's a Plains. Here's a Grey Pelt Refuge. This is the green-white refuge, or it's basically a gain land. You gain 1 life, it'll enter tapped, and you can get a green or a white from it. Rushwood Grove is the mono-green storage land, so it'll enter tapped. You can tap to put a storage counter, and then you can tap to remove any number of storage counters from it to get a green mana for each storage counter removed from it. Colony Garden, this is really good. It's from Worldwake. It enters tapped. You get a 0/1 plant token, and then you add green to your mana pool. That doesn't seem like a lot, but there are spells in this deck, like creature tokens you control get +1/+1 in Vigilance. So, if you have a land that gives you a 1/2 Vigilance that enters tapped, that's a really good land. Havenwood Battleground, this is from the dual deck. It'll enter tapped. You can tap for a green, or tap and sack to add 2 greens. That'll be over here. Yeah, that'll be over there. Jungle Basin. It's the mono-green bounce land, so it comes into play tapped. When it comes into play, you have to return an untapped forest you control, and then it'll tap for a green and a colorless. Myriad Landscape. This is a very good land also from the Commander deck. If you see that symbol there, I don't know. If you don't know, that's the symbol for the Commander decks from 2015. It'll tap for a colorless, or you can pay 2 and tap and sack it, and search your library for up to 2 basic land cards that share a land type, and put them onto the battlefield tapped, then shuffle your library. This is excellent for mana fixing for Trostani. Like I said, if you have to have green or white or you have to have 2 green and 2 white. So if you're stuck on mana, say you have 2 green, you need your 2 white, you draw this, you can play this, it'll enter tapped, but then next turn you can pay your 2 and tap and sack, now you've got your 2 green. So you'll be able to mana fix. It'll take a minute, but you can do it. Riftstone Portal, I like this land. It's just, I feel like it needs a little, I need to be able to use it better. I don't have that many ways to use it, but it's a good land. It'll tap for colorless, and as long as it's in your graveyard, all your lands can tap for green or white. That is fantastic for mana fixing. I just need more outlets to sacrifice lands. Here's Grove of the Guardian. This is the foil. This one is from the green-white deck that was around whenever Return to Ravnica came out, but you couldn't really tell if you had just a normal foil Grove of the Guardian, it'd look the same. This taps for a colorless, and then you can pay 3 and a green and a white and tap it to tap 2 untapped creatures you control and sacrifice this land, and you get an 8/8 green and white elemental creature token with vigilance onto the battlefield. That was hilarious in standard, because I'd get 5 8/8s with vigilance, and everyone was like, how do I deal with that, you know? Like, even control players were like, I board wiped, and then he used his land to get more creatures, and I was out of options. It was hilarious. And everyone's friends would always make fun of him, like, why are you losing to this guy? He's running tokens. It's like, because he's got 8/8 vigilant tokens. It's pretty great. So that's always a good land to have. Here's a plains. Here's Oran Reef the Vastwood. It'll tap, or it enters the battlefield tapped. You can tap for green, or you can tap to put a +1/+1 counter on each green creature that entered the battlefield this turn. That's useful if you have a thing that gives you several green creatures, like, I'll just use this option here, Terastodon. This will give you 4 green creatures, you know, if you use it all on yourself. And then you can tap this, and then it gets a counter on each green creature that entered the battlefield this turn. On a related note, however, if you were to use Terastodon and gave them green creatures, and then tried, so say you got one of the 3/3s, and then you kept your Terastodon, and then they got 2 3/3s because you want to destroy their lands, then you would have to, and then this would put counters on their creatures as well. So if you're giving them green tokens, not so great. There's a spell from the green commander deck that gives them a bunch of green elves. So that's not excellent if you really don't want, you know, to help your opponent out any more than that spell does already. But it is a good card for basic, you know, creatures as well. Here is a mono white gain land. It enters tapped, and you gain 2 life, and it'll tap for white mana. Here's a forest. Here's Mosswort Bridge. This is the green hideaway land. This one's from the older Commander series, but this will tap for green. It'll enter tapped. You can reveal the top 4 cards of your library, exile 1 face down, and then put the rest on the bottom of your library. And then you can pay green and tap it, and then the card that you exiled with this, you can cast without, or play without casting its mana cost, as long as you have creatures with power 10 or greater total. So that's pretty good later on in the game, you know, if you have a ridiculous spell like Terastodon, for instance. Man, this card's just really all-around good example. Yeah, so say, you know, later on in the game you have a ton of, like, just a couple creatures, but they end up all adding up to 5, and you want to cast your Terastodon, you can do that. You just pay your green and tap this, and so for 2 mana, essentially, you get a 8-drop. That's pretty solid. I like it. Here's a plains. Here's Temple of the False God. This is a commander staple. You can tap for 2 colorless, but only if you control 5 or more lands. That's pretty solid. Treetop Village. I like this land a lot, actually. It enters tapped. You can tap for a green, or you can pay 2, and it's a 3/3 creature with trample until end of turn. That's pretty good. I like that. Here's a plains. Here's a different mono green cycling land. It'll enter tapped. You can tap for a green, or you can cycle for a green to discard and draw cards. So instead of paying 2 mana, you can just pay 1 green. Yeah, this doesn't sacrifice, but it is, that does put land in your graveyard, so I will go ahead and, put that over there, because it plays the same role. Here's Ghost Quarter. It's, 1 drop, or, sorry, it's, can tap for 1 colorless, and you can tap it to destroy target land, and then its controller may search his or her library for a basic land card and put it onto the battlefield. If your opponent has a dual land, you can destroy that. If you need to mana fix, you can destroy one of your own lands. Well, you'd have to end up destroying 2 lands. Or that actually works really well on Riftstone Portal, if it's in your graveyard. And then you can search for a basic land too, so it helps you mana fix ridiculously well. Here's basically what is essentially another guild gate. It's it enters tapped, and you can add green or white. This taps for a colorless, or you can pay 5 and tap it and sack it to get a 3/4 artifact creature with flying. Here's a mono white scryland, so it'll enter tapped. You can scry one, and it'll tap for white. And here's a forest. Now, at the 10-minute mark, we're finally done with the lands. Now on to the fun stuff, right? So, we've got Trostani. I've brought him up a lot. He's an 8-drop 9/9. When he enters the battlefield, you can destroy up to 3 target non-creature permanents. For each permanent put into a graveyard this way, its controller puts a 3/3 green elephant token onto the battlefield. What happens a lot of times is once you've got 8 mana, you're pretty set. What a lot of players will do is blow up their own lands. They'll just play this, destroy 3 of their own lands. So now for 8 lands, they've got essentially what is 18 power and toughness on the field. That's really good. Druid's Deliverance, this was also my favorite card in Standard because it's a 2-drop, like when it was Standard, it's a 2-drop fog that lets you populate. So when you have an 8/8 token down and they try and, swing with a bunch of flyers, that your token doesn't have vigilant, or it doesn't have reach, so they're just like, I'm going to win with flyers, and then you fog, and then you get another 8/8, and they're really all kinds of upset. Same thing here. Populate, creatures you control are indestructible till end of turn, so when they try and board wipe and all you do is get another 8/8 token, they get really upset. And it's an instant speed, so it's really great. This is one of the draw spells I was talking about. It's a 5-drop, 4/4 Garruk's Pack Leader. Whenever another creature with power 3 or greater enters the battlefield under your control, you may draw a card. Trostani, after that's down, is hilarious because you play Garruk's Pack Leader, and they're just like, oh, okay, cool, so eventually he'll get stuff. And you go, yeah, eventually next turn, and you play this, and you get 4 creatures with power 3 or greater, you can draw 4. So for 8 mana, yeah, you're 3 lands down, but you've got 18 power and toughness on the board, and then you just drew 4 cards. So that's excellent. Soul Warden, this is the 1-drop 1/1 that whenever another creature enters the battlefield, you gain 1 life. That is very useful. Like I said, life gain is a huge theme in this deck. Here's Centaur's Herald. It's a 1-drop 0/1. You can pay 3 and sack it to get a 3/3 green Centaur token. Centaur tokens are some of the most used tokens in this deck, just because there's just several spells that give you Centaur tokens. Naturalize, obviously, this has been around for a long time. 2-drop, destroy target artifact or enchantment at instant speed. Call of the Conclave, 2-drop, get a 3/3 green Centaur creature token onto the battlefield. That is just useful, man. It's a 2-drop that gives you a 3/3 that you can make more of. That's just a useful card, especially in this deck. But I loved it in Standard. Here's a 4-drop. You can get 3 1/1 elves, or you can pay 4 to put and discard it to get to put 3 +1/+1 counters on a creature you control. So that's good. Here's Shield of the Oversoul. It's a 3-drop enchant creature. If it's green, it gets +1/+1 and indestructible, and if it's white, it gets +1/+1 and flying. It is so funny to do this because now you've got a 4/7 indestructible flying commander. That's hilarious. The shields are good. If you have a commander deck that's 2 colors, get the shield of those 2 colors because it's just really helpful to have. Scion of the Vidugazi. If you've guys seen one of my older videos, I've got that playmat. That's just the art of this. I got it for $7 on eBay. It was a great deal. It's a 5-drop 4/4. You get a 1/1 flying bird token when you play it, and then you get to populate. So, like I said, it's really hilarious to get a 5-drop 4/4, 1/1 flying, and an 8/8 vigilance, and then gain all that life off of it. That's just excellent. Crown of Convergence. This is from Ravnica City of Guilds. It is a 2-drop artifact. You can play with the top card of your library. You play with the top card of your library revealed, and if it's a creature card, then all creatures you control that share a color with that creature get +1/+1. And then you can pay the best part about it is you can pay a green and a white to put the top card of your library on the bottom. So, if you have a draw trigger, or even if you're, it's the end of your opponent's turn and they go to pass at the end of turn, you can just pay the green and the white to shuffle, to basically scry that top card away if you don't like it. Which is really good, because if you're drawing, you just, you want to make sure you know what you're drawing, and that's helpful. That's just card advantage. Ray of Revelation is a good card. It destroys an enchantment, and then it flashbacks for 1 green, so it's a 2-drop. So essentially, you can destroy 2 enchantments for 3. That's really good. Trostani's Judgment is good. There's very few uses for it, but one of the things is people like to make the gods from the Theros block their commanders now. And so a 6-drop that exiles it, and then you get to populate, I mean, there are cheaper things to exile creatures, but the fact that you get to populate, and it is at instant speed, that's just good. There's a 2-drop, you get 2/1/1 white humans, but if you have 5 or less life, you get 5/1/1 white humans. So essentially it's a 2-drop, you get 2/1/1s. This card's a new one for me. It's a 5-drop. Creatures you control can't be the target of spells or abilities your opponents control. So creatures you control get hexproof for 5 mana, and you can pay 2 to regenerate target creature. That's pretty good, I think. Emerald Medallion, this is from the Commander series. It's the 2-drop. Green spells you cast cost 1 less. Here's Parallel Lives. It's a 4-drop. This is one of the win cons for the deck. It's a 4-drop. If an effect would put one or more tokens onto the battlefield under your control, it puts twice that many tokens onto the battlefield instead. So, that 4-drop that gave you 3/1/1 elves, well, now it gives you 6/1/1 elves for 3 mana. The 2-drop that gave you 2/1/1 humans, now it gives you 4/1/1 humans for 2 mana. Every populate trigger, you populate twice. It's really good. Here's Destroy Target Artifact or Enchantment. You gain 3 life. Now, like I said, this isn't as good as Naturalize because it costs 1 more, but you gain 3 life. Life gain is a really big part of this deck. This deck has some things that would make it really slow, and you wouldn't win. Like the mana curve is pretty high, and you wouldn't win except for all the life gain. It's just really good. Beastmaster Ascension. This is from the Commander deck series. It's a 3-drop. Whenever a creature you control attacks, it gets a quest counter. If it has 7 or more quest counters, you get +5, or creatures you control get +5/+5. So, imagine, this is the next card, Fungal Sprouting. Imagine Fungal Sprouting when you have your 8/8. Alright, so now you get 8/1/1 Saprolings for 4 mana. That's pretty good. And then next turn, if you have Beastmaster Ascension down, the next turn you swing all 8 of your 1/1s, and now you're swinging 40 damage off the 4 mana you just played. It's ridiculous. Here's Sundering Growth. Destroy a target artifact or enchantment, then populate. This is really good. It's I prefer it to Naturalize in this deck, absolutely. Skull Clamp. This is a staple in... Well, it's not a staple, but it's been a really good card since it came around. But it is a 1-drop. Equipped creature gets +1/-1, and whenever a equipped creature dies, draw 2 cards. This is an interesting thing, because things like Fungal Sprouting and things like, Gather the Townsfolk, these abilities, you want things like Beastmaster Ascension, sure, because they boost your guys. But if you don't have things like that down, like, global +1, +X+N abilities, then, you have a bunch of 1/1 makers, and Skull Clamp gives you the ability to pay 1 mana to basically draw 2 cards. You just equip it onto the dude, and you draw 2 cards. That's, that's one of the draw engines I was talking about that make you want Reliquary Tower. Here's Rampaging Baloths. It's a mythic rare from the Commander series. It's a 6-drop, 6/6 trample, and whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, you may put a 4/4 green beast token. That's a 6-drop, 6/6 trample that basically every time you hit a land drop, you get a 4/4. I mean, it deserves to be mythic rare. Here's a Alive and Well. It's alive as 4 mana for a 3/3 centaur, which isn't great. We've seen we can get that for 2 mana, so I normally don't cast Alive actually, but 2 mana for, or 1 mana to get 2 life for each creature you control. If you've been making tokens for several turns and then you run into a well, you're happy. Here's one of the reasons why life gain is really great in this deck, and why I think life gain is essential to the deck, is Angelic Accord. This card is excellent. You have a 4 mana enchantment at the beginning of your end step. Each end step, if you gain 4 or more life this turn, put a 4/4 white angel creature token with flying onto the battlefield. So, you basically play, anytime you have a creature, if you have Trostani down, anytime you play a creature with 4 more toughness, you get an angel at the end of the turn. And then, you get 4 more life off the angel. So that's it's really well, it's really usable. And also, with the global abilities like I was talking about that give you, your creatures you control plus whatever, then you run into the option, I missed a land, it's Selesnya Guildgate. You run into the option of really finding here, this is what I'm looking for. Collective Blessing. It's a 6-drop, creatures you control get +3/+3. Think about it. Every time now that you play a 1/1, you're triggering Angelic Accord. Now, because you play a 1/1, it gets +3/+3, so then you gain 4 life off of Trostani, and Angelic Accord will then go off at the end of the turn. That is just it's a, you think it doesn't happen often, but I swear it does. I'm only going to go over the good cards, like the rares and uncommons that I think are really, really good now, because I realize we're at the 20-minute mark on a deck tech. So, and granted, this is a commander deck tech, so it's going to run a little long, but you know, I don't need to explain to you why every single card's in the deck. I think you've figured it out by now. That you make tokens, and then sometimes you make the tokens bigger. You gain a lot of life, and you really just overpower them. So I'm going to basically cut the rest of what I'm talking about in half now. I've got a Najani Collar of the Pride in the deck. It is a 3 mana, 4 loyalty. You put a plus. Its +1 is put a +1/+1 counter on up to 1 target creature. Its -3 is target creature gets flying and double strike till end of turn, and its -8, which is what you ultimately want to get, is put X 2/2 white cat creature tokens onto the battlefield, where X is your life total. So you gain a ton of life off of this. Keep plussing here until you can negate. So 5 turns. So hopefully turn 8, you can negate, and you get 100 2/2 white cat tokens, and if Trostani's still on the battlefield, you gain 200 life. That's the dream. Hornet Queen, 7-drop, 2/2, flying, death touch. When it enters the battlefield, you get 4 1/1 green insect creature tokens with flying and death touch. So, 7 mana for 5 flying death touchers. That's a big old sign that says, don't tread on me. They're not going to want to swing at you anytime soon, and you can make even more of these tokens. It's good. Advent of the Worm, 4 mana for an instant to put a 5/5 green worm creature token onto the battlefield. I should point out at this point, Angelic Accord says at the beginning of each end step. So if you have Trostani down and you play Advent of the Worm on your opponent's end step, or no, sorry, if you play Advent of the Worm in your opponent's main phase 2, you get a 5/5 green worm creature token. You gain 5 life. At the end of your opponent's turn, you get a 4/4 angel. So you can really use that Angelic Accord on your opponent's turns too, which is another reason why it's excellent. Here's Devout Invocation. This is one of my favorite cards in the deck because it is really just all kinds of fun. It's 7 mana, tap any number of untapped creatures you control. You get a 4/4 white angel creature token with flying onto the battlefield for each creature you tap this way. So if you've been making a ton of 1/1 tokens or a ton of 2/2 tokens, and you then a couple turns later you pay 7 mana and tap all of them, and you get a ton of flyers. This is a win con just because if you have 20 or 30 creatures down, 20 4/4 flyers. I mean, no one knows how to deal with that unless they want to board wipe or ratchet bomb. But I mean, in general, it's hard to deal with 80 in the air next turn. This card's helpful. It's 4 mana, and it's hybrid mana, which is really good because mana fixing's difficult, even in just a 2-color deck. And at the beginning of your upkeep, Populate. So, if at the end of your opponent's turn you played Advent of the Worm and got a 5/5, now at the beginning of your next turn, you can get another 5/5. That's Amara Tandris. I'm not sure she needs to be in the deck, but I like her. 7 mana for a 5/7, prevent all damage that would be dealt to creature tokens you control. Granted, with global pump abilities and global plus X plus N abilities, your guys are they can take a good bit of damage and not die. But this is really helpful, and also 7 toughness with the thing like Trostani on the battlefield is it's helpful to gain 7 life, I think. Here's Heliod, the Sun God. He is a 4-drop, 5/6 indestructible. You have to have the devotion, of course, to make him. But creatures you control get vigilance, and you can pay 4 to get a 2/1 white cleric enchantment creature token onto the battlefield. That's good because it's 4 mana for a 2/1, which isn't excellent. But if you really have nothing else to do at the end of turn, then hey, you get another creature token. Intangible Virtue, creature tokens you control get +1/+1 in vigilance for 2 mana. That's a good enchantment. Sylvan Offering. X and a green, choose an opponent. You and that player each put an XX tree folk, and then you and a different opponent, or the same one, it doesn't really matter, get X1/1 green elf warriors. So you can really, if you do it with one, if you're playing French, then it's really just like, hey, you and I will each, get these things. And essentially, you think, okay, well, they'll just trade with each other. But say you have Intangible Virtue down, and you do that in a game of 1 versus 1. Then you get X2/2 vigilances. They get X1/1s, and then you get an X+1 vigilant, and they get an XX. So it's just slightly, it puts you slightly over the edge. Or, you have, I'm drawing a blank. The card that gives Collective Blessing. All your creatures get +3/+3. If you've got that down, then all your guys are going to get, you're going to have massive creatures, and they're just going to get normal, little bitty creatures. So that's excellent, I think, especially in multiplayer too, because you can kind of ration it out. It's political, which is my favorite way to play Commander. All right, I promised I would separate the lands that entered the graveyard. So there's a good chunk of them, actually. You'd be surprised, but Titania, Protector of Argoth, is one of the legendary creatures. She's a mythic rare from the Commander series. You pay 5 mana for a 5/3. When she enters the battlefield, a land goes from your graveyard to the battlefield. Then, if a land you control is put into the graveyard from the battlefield, you get a 5/3 elemental token. So, basically, for every one of these lands, once you play her and you start sacrificing, your Gargoyle Castle, you start sacrificing Myriad Landscapes and stuff, then you're going to get 5/3 tokens, which is helpful. And then also, Titania herself gets, she brings back a land. So say you used your Myriad Landscape for mana fixing. You searched for 2 lands that shared a land type. Well, now you get that land back, and then you can play and sacrifice it again, and not only can you search for the other 2 lands so that your mana fixing's even better, but then also you get a 5/3 elemental token. So I think that she definitely deserves to be in here. And then, if I can find it, well, here is Freyalise Llanowar's Fury. She's the commander from the Green Commander deck. I think that she was one of my favorite things to get whenever I opened up this box, whenever I opened up the Green Commander box, because her +1, she's just so green. Her +1 is you get an Elvish Mystic token, right? It's a 1/1 Elf Druid creature token that can tap for a green mana. So, her +1 is you get an Elvish Mystic. That's good. Her -2 is Naturalize, right? Destroy an artifact or enchantment. And then her -6 is draw a card for each green creature you control. Come on, man. In a deck that makes a ton of green creatures, that's great. And also, here's something funny that I think this is my favorite draw engine in the deck, even though it probably shouldn't be. +1 of get Mana Dorks that tap for green. Next turn, so basically +1, and then next turn, you tap your green guy to get a green mana to equip this to draw 2 cards. And so every turn, you'll get to tap one of your creatures that you got last turn, especially if you're populating them, then you can do it twice in a turn. You're just drawing a ton off of this. And then my favorite win con in the entire deck, Stormherd. It is a 10 drop. You get X1/1 White Pegasus is where X, with flying, where X is your life total. So after turn 10, you should have gained a healthy chunk of life. You can see yourself being at 80 or 100 life at turn 10. And the ability to get 81/1s, especially if you have a thing that, and then also if you have Trostani down, then you just doubled your life total. Or say you have Collective Blessing or Intangible Virtue, then you just multiplied your life total by 5 or 6. So, I mean, that card really is an excellent win con for the deck. So yeah, as you can see, she might not stand out as much at first, but she has excellent abilities, and that the life gain, versatility, usability is wonderful. I realize that this video is a half an hour long, and I apologize for that, but that was my deck tech for Trostani, Selesnya's voice. Like, subscribe, comment, tell me things I'm missing. I think I could use like Arise the Redeemed or something, but and then not Parallel Lives, but Doubling Season. But other than that, I mean, this deck is pretty solid. Yeah, but tell me what you think. Follow me on Twitter at Braden Grisham, and keep playing Magic.